Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As always, we work in a bipartisan fashion on this committee. Ms. Ambassador, are there IAEA inspectors at the uranium mines in Salgand and Gatchin? Do we know why that is the case, given the IAEA inspectors' presence at the other parts of Iran's nuclear supply chain?
The young man who's behind me, Richard Nephew, is a technical expert in this regard, as is Dr. Jim Timby, who is with me. And the Safeguards Agreement of the IAEA only requires the presence at the most sensitive facilities, where we do have quite an extensive inspection regime. But indeed, one of the things that we want from Iran through the process with the IAEA is additional safeguards and additional monitoring. So we certainly understand your point. And indeed, as I think I mentioned in my testimony, the IAEA is meeting with Iran today, trying to move on a structured approach where they would agree on, in fact, what could then be inspected by Iran, by the IAEA. They have not been able to get that structured approach protocol agreed to, and there will be a Board of Governors meeting of the IAEA at the beginning of June, and my suspicion is there will be great disappointment in Iran's responsiveness.
My point being that those start the supply chain, and it is possible that there are conversion facilities like the one at Esfahan or enrichment facilities like the ones at Natanz and Fordow, of which we are not aware. Is that your understanding of my point?
I do understand your point, and what I would suggest is that perhaps you hope your schedule will allow you to join the classified session.
Thank you. Next question. We talk frequently about sanctions. Then that leads to talk of acts of war. On most occasions, we're talking about an offensive act of war, such as an airstrike or a strike with naval gunfire. There are also defensive acts of war under international law, such as a naval blockade. Do you have any assessment on the impact of Iran's economy as a whole, or the nuclear program in particular, of the effects of a hypothetical naval blockade?
I do not, but happy to discuss it further in a classified session.
Do you have any assessments of the scope and number of scientists working on Iran's nuclear program?
Again, I would save that for the classified session.
I have seen reports of cooperation, scientific cooperation agreements between North Korea and Iran. Those reports suggest something along the lines of the 2002 cooperation agreement that North Korea had with Syria that led ultimately to the destruction of the nuclear site in Syria in 2007. What is the scope of that potential agreement in your assessment?
Again, we can talk further about the detail of any of this in the classified session. What I will say, and it follows up on what Congresswoman Frankel asked as well, we do know that the DPRK watches what happens to Iran, and Iran watches what happens to the DPRK. And we know historically about times where either directly or through other conduits there has been cooperation among countries. Everyone is very well aware of the history with Pakistan, for instance, and AQ Khan in a network of proliferation. So it is very important, and we think very carefully about where there may be interactions that affect one or the other of these situations. But happy to discuss it further in a classified session.
Shifting slightly somewhat, the President in the past called Syria's use of chemical weapons a potential red line or game changer. Given our reaction now that our intelligence services, as well as those of allied Western governments, have confirmed the use, at least on a limited scale, of chemical weapons in Syria, do you see potential for Iran's government being emboldened to believe that perhaps our words are not as strong as we would suggest?
I actually don't think that's happening at this time, but you're welcome to get the IC's assessment when we do meet in a classified session. What I would say is the intelligence community, as we published, has agreed with varying levels of confidence that chemical weapons were used in small amounts in at least 2 instances in Syria. But having high confidence in the intelligence community, for which I have great admiration, is not, in fact, all that one needs to take some of the actions that many people have contemplated. And the President wants to be very prudent about the steps he takes, as he should be. We have unfortunate experience in our history where we've taken action and it turned out that the intelligence assessment was either misinterpreted or not accurate. And so I think he is being very thoughtful about how he is proceeding here. But rest assured, we are gathering additional data and making additional judgments.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. My regrets, but thank you for your service.
Thank you, Congressman.